Hi, my name is David McGinty and I am the co-founder of Walnut Wasp, which is a creative agency based in Glasgow, Scotland, specialising in the wedding market and in food and beverage businesses. This is the first of 4 videos in our Wedding Marketing 101 series. We're going to be putting out 4 of these, talking about various aspects of how to market your wedding business, although it will be hopefully full of information that will be useful not only to people in the wedding sector, but really small businesses, self-employed people, small, medium-sized enterprises in a variety of different sectors. So today we're going to be talking about brand fundamentals. So that's how we use your brand to communicate certain messaging about your business. For the purposes of this discussion, I think anything that tells the story of what your business is. Your brand is really your representation in the marketplace of who you are and what you do. So anything at all that represents your business, that tells the story of what you do, effectively that is your brand. Your brand is kind of a malleable concept. It doesn't necessarily have the same definition for everyone. That, broadly speaking, is what we're talking about here when we talk about brand. I think the useful thing to bear in mind when we're thinking of what our brand does is your brand is full of opportunities for you to convey certain messaging about your business. So that entails a bunch of opportunities and some decisions to be made. What messaging do you want to convey about your business? Being a fairly fundamental first question. Everything though within the brand, within the construct of your brand is, as I say, an opportunity, from the name of your business to your logo and associated colour schemes and typefaces, that kind of thing, your website, anything that you put into the world, any piece of work that you choose to curate and to display on your social channels or on your site, anything and everything that you do in a business related capacity, that is, or at least has the potential to be, a vehicle for your messaging, and therefore it's worth considering the purpose and the use of each and every one of those little steps. So when we think about the name of your business, that's an opportunity to convey some key messaging elements that go with your work. Here's where I think a lot of the people watching this video today are going to be at. I think a lot of the people who are in the wedding market, working as sole traders, who are focusing their energies on providing the service and developing the service that they offer, I think you're probably in a position where your message is currently, I exist and I can do this thing for you if you want. That, I think, is not to be dismissive. I think that's the type of messaging that is prevalent among small businesses in the wedding business. Hey, I'm a florist, so I'm around, you can book me. What I think we want to try and develop, especially in this video, is this idea that, well, actually we want to say a little bit more than that, because the value, and if you've heard me talk about marketing before, there's a very strong likelihood you've heard me say something like this. I think the value, your marketing value, lies in where you differ from your competitors. So it's those elements that are different about you to everyone else that is actually of interest from a marketing perspective, and that's what we really want to focus on. So I want to talk about differentiation, basically differential marketing. Now that actually overlaps with the business itself. This is where marketing and your business are, they're not 2 completely separate steps. It's not a case of, so we have our business and our service here, and then marketing is this thing that we slide on top in order to make money. The nature of the business is inherently transactional, and as such, everything we do is a marketing consideration and a service consideration. So your service is directly related to your sellability. So what we actually want to do for best results, I think, is understand how we differ from the marketplace, add differential factors if we don't currently differ significantly, and then be really, really good at communicating those differences, those meaningful differences to the market in any way that we can, including through each and every one of the opportunities that exist throughout our branding and our branding collateral. That's kind of a lot, so let me just run through that again. We want to understand where we meaningfully differ from our competition. So that means looking at what we currently offer and figuring out what are the hallmarks of what I do that define my work. What are recurring things that I do in my work that I like. Number two, if you're one of many, if you don't really differentiate a great deal in terms of the service or your particular style or anything like that, then maybe there's that opportunity to proactively add stuff to make you different, because that's going to make life easier for you when you go to sell your product and service. And then how do you actually take those differential elements and communicate them through everything that goes out? Like I said, this is brand fundamentals, so we are talking on a very fundamental level. That obviously has the potential to be a big transformation for your business, especially if you're currently not particularly differentiating yourself. Now, how do we do that? How do we start to stand apart from our competitors? Sometimes that's very, very difficult. Sometimes we work in a very competitive marketplace. The wedding photography market, for example, just now, is an extremely competitive market. How can you stand out and differentiate? Well, there's a couple of ways. Often, if you've heard me talk about this in the past, you might have heard me talk about examples of specialization. And I'll give a couple of examples of specialization in this video, because it's a way that you can differentiate yourself, is to have a particular specialization that you therefore shrink your market. So, for example, my wife and I, we ran a wedding photography business that shot nothing but urban weddings. So we took the whole market, everyone that's getting married, and shrunk it down and said, we're really only interested in shooting these weddings here that are happening in the city, or that are happening in industrial venues, or whatever it might be. That automatically, that shrinks the market, but it allows us to communicate our passion for one particular type of wedding. And that means if you are getting married in a city venue and you want it, or you're having a city elopement, and you speak to 3 photographers that tell you, we love city weddings, we love them, we're all about them. But then you go on our website and it's front and center. We're saying we love city weddings publicly at the expense of everything else, shrinking the market, and therefore we're able to communicate to those people that no, we really do love this thing, this is all we do, and this is what we've spent our time developing and getting stronger at, and etc, etc. That's a way of differentiating ourselves, giving ourselves a competitive advantage over those other businesses that we might be up against. Potentially, it at least gives us, now we have a bit of messaging, so there's a little bit of meat to those bones. So we're no longer saying, hey, we're a photographer, like many other photographers, you could book us or not book us. We're saying we're a photographer and we love this thing that you're doing. So we're as passionate about your wedding as you are, because these are the style of weddings that we love and that we thrive at. For now though, I want to focus on other ways that we can differentiate ourselves. So that's a specialization. A specialization is a risky move, and it's not for everyone. Not everyone is realistically going to want to limit the market, want to restrict themselves to just one thing. For various reasons, it might not suit you to outright specialize in something. That's totally fine. For most people, that's probably not going to be the solution. So what we do want to do though is we want to take, well, what is there about you? It doesn't have to be one big thing. It can be a bunch of little things. What makes you, you? So you need to figure out what makes you, you, and then be able to communicate why that should be valuable to the client. That's a big job, like I said, and especially in terms of when you're in a more competitive market. If you're a wedding photographer, how well do you know your own work? How well do you know the hallmarks of your work? And to what extent can you communicate with your clients and with your prospective clients about why the hallmarks of your work should be considered strengths? That's a difficult exercise, and it's something you need to sort of just spend a lot of time thinking about. When it comes to adding differential factors as opposed to identifying ones that already exist, this is where you have the opportunity to research the market, look at where there are problems existing in the market or in the perception of your industry. Look at what low-hanging fruit could be solved by someone, and basically, in a nutshell, what can I do that I'm not currently doing to just make my customer's life easier, or to improve the quality of the service, or anything like that? What can I improve upon? That's genuinely the thing. And like I said, so we're supposed to be talking about marketing here, right? But we're actually talking about all aspects of the business. But that's differential marketing. That's the meritocracy that we live in today, where you can't necessarily advertise in the way that you could 10 years ago. You can't necessarily cut through the noise because A, there's so much noise, and B, there's so many ways to circumvent it. We've got Netflix, so we're not watching television ads. We've got ad blocker, so you can't just pay to have your stuff thrown in front of the customer's eyeballs anymore. You need to really think about, how do I cut through that noise? And very often that means just improving things and coming up with novel things, solving problems for the customer, all that sort of stuff. So that means asking your customers about the process, asking them what their concerns are when they're looking to find a wedding photographer, a wedding florist, a wedding band. Sussing out, what can I do about this? What can I do that no one else is doing? Easier said than done, sure, but you know, it's not supposed to be easy. That part of it involves a lot of research and introspection and real, you know, development and brain power and experimentation. The good thing is, of course, that's a process that you can continue to evolve as you go. It's very difficult to figure that stuff out right off the bat. It's something that's going to take a few years of being in business and figuring out what you like, figuring out what you're good at, before you can properly articulate a long-term strategy for differentiation. So then we come to, how do we communicate those things through the opportunities that exist within the brand? I'm going to go back then briefly to my wife and I's photography business that I mentioned. It's called Rooftop Mosaic, and the reason I bring that up again is because I want to talk about the name. When we started that business, effectively it was a continuation of my wife's photography business, which was just her name, Gail Kelly Photography. That's a fairly common format in the industry, and I'm sure there's many wedding photographers watching this whose business name is first name, second name, photography. That's totally fine. When we became a two-person team, that was no longer a name that was working for us for obvious reasons, because it's named Gail Kelly Photography, but there's really two of us. But that the main issue with that is that there's an inefficiency there, because we have this differential quality in that we're a two-person team, and you can make the argument that as in you can make the argument in your marketing that being a two-person team is beneficial over a single shooter that brings along a second shooter colleague. So we have that. So we have a two-person team now, but if the name is first name, second name photography, we're not communicating that key element that we are a team. So we're missing an opportunity to communicate something that does help us stand apart a little bit as a brand. By the way, I'm not suggesting for a minute that we're the only two-person team in the world, so I certainly don't mean that helps us stand apart from everyone. What I mean is, it's a tick in our favour, and that's what I mean by collecting small differential elements. We're a two-person team. That, to some people, that gives us a leg up over people who are not a two-person team. The fact that we add an add-on video, that gives us a leg up over some people in the eyes of some consumers. And then the fact that we only shoot urban weddings, again, that gives another tick in the box for certain people, obviously at the expense of a large section of the market. So looking at the name issue, then we decided to rename the business, and that then became, well, how can we communicate some of the key things about the business in a name? And we came up with the name Rooftop Mosaic. So that's Rooftop Mosaic, the industrial and the artistic. So the idea of the city as art, that's the sort of highly pretentious impetus for that particular name. I'm pretty proud of that one. The idea that I'm communicating to you is that something as fundamental as the brand name is your first opportunity to start communicating something about the business that refers to or in some way tells the story of some of your key differential qualities. So I'm going to show you some examples now of work that we've created that has sought to communicate some differential qualities for some brands through various selections and choices that we've made in the brand and brand collateral process. So I'm going to start by talking about some collateral that we put together for Nick Bruce and his Blinding Lights. Nick Bruce and his Blinding Lights, full disclosure, is my own wedding band. We play nothing but funk soul bangers, basically. That's the music we love. I'm going to show you this is some of the collateral that we put together. So the brand and the brand name and the posters that we've designed and everything like that, and any video content that we've produced, they're all designed to tell the story of our key differential qualities. Those differential qualities are, number one, it's a throwback band. So we play a lot of throwback hits. We've got an old school entertainer style frontman. So a lot of what we're trying to communicate is this is a retro band, and specifically we play a lot of funk soul stuff, so a lot of the design elements are inspired both by kind of Motown, Stax, Atlantic Soul style artwork from the 60s, and also a sort of 80s, Michael Jackson, Prince, that sort of synth pop 80s aesthetic as well. We try and incorporate a little bit of that sometimes as well, and you can kind of see it in some of the typography in the branding. Even in the name of the band, again, it's Nick Bruce and His Blinding Lights. So the format of that, it's not Nick Bruce and The Blinding Lights. That His is a throwback to, Bill Haley and his Comets. The fact that the frontman's name is in the band, again, communicates another key differential element that we are a frontman-led band. It's a show band. It's an entertainment spectacle. That's the message that we want to communicate. So we're trying to tell as much as we can in those elements, just to be as efficient as we can with the marketing. Here's some work that we did for Big Bear Bakery, what we were trying to do with them. So that's a Glasgow-based bakery and cake maker. They do a lot of weddings and they do some work for the trade as well. They specialise in things like, cake tables. So they do because they do tray bakes, they do, brownies, as well as big, minimalist, chunky, fun, awesome wedding cakes. So what we basically did with their brand and with their website is we used it as an opportunity to communicate their joyful approach. So they really are about uncomplicated, good fun. We shot some photography for them and some video that was designed to emphasize that they are experts at wedding cake tables. So they'll give you a bunch of stuff, lots of variety. That's the kind of thing we wanted to drip feed through every decision we made at the brand. And if you look at some of the textures and things like that we used throughout the website, again, it's those types of colours and it's that type of sort of minimalist design. All of that together is designed to reflect this feel that you get from the brand. So I think that communicates exactly what you're going to get from Big Bear Bakery and what that experience is going to be like. We recently tweaked Lauren McGlynn's branding. Lauren is a wedding photographer who's based in Edinburgh. We basically just tweaked the branding and designed some new conversion collateral for her. So that was about conveying her joy. She wanted to, in her own words, embrace her inner goofball. So in turn, we wanted to get that across. When you're looking at our brochure, you should see lots of smiling faces. The type of photography that she managed to identify that she does really well, that stuff we wanted to get across in our brochure. Previously, our branding was her name, and in the top it had Arthur's Seat, which is a big hill in Edinburgh, but she shoots a lot of urban weddings and she's not necessarily just a hilly, landscapey style photographer. She also does urban stuff, so we added a kind of abstract set of steps underneath Arthur's Seat in her brand. I'm not saying necessarily anyone's going to get that from looking at the brand because it is very abstract, but what they are going to see is geometric shapes combined with natural shapes, starting to convey that stuff. And again, when you get to the sales collateral that she's got, you're hammering this idea that she captures this certain type of emotion. She's embracing her inner goofball, as I said. Those are just some examples of some businesses that we'll work with where we've worked with them to identify some of those differential elements and then start to kind of bleed them out through, sorry, that's a horrible analogy, communicate them through the various channels that are available. By the way, interestingly, Big Bear Bakery are not the only company that do cake tables. Lauren McGlynn's not the only person that captures joyful, emotional photography. Nick Bruce and His Blinding Lights are not the only throwback band in the country. What you will find is if you're the person that's communicating those key differential elements, as in putting it into words and putting it into design decisions and things like that, where your competitors aren't necessarily, then you'll get the credit for it in the eyes of a consumer, even if you're compared to someone who basically offers a near identical service. Genuinely, if you're the one that's smart enough to say it and to add the anchor of that language to your customer's awareness and the other person doesn't, that often is enough. That often is enough to give you that leg up that you need to convert that sale. When you think about, look at your work and imagine your work was displayed on a wall, unmarked, unbranded, alongside a bunch of your competitors' work. Unfortunately, even your most discerning customers they're not going to have the level of appreciation and analytical skill that you can apply to your work. So they're not going to see the differences in the way that you're going to see them. So they're going to be able to identify much less of it. They're going to see that one person has a style that's different from another person, potentially in some cases, but they're not going to have the tools that they need to articulate what those differences are. So you can't leave it up to them to decide on what the message about your brand out there in the marketplace should be. You can't leave it to them to interpret your work necessarily, because they're not professional florists, they're not professional photographers. They're not going to be able to analyse it to the level that you are. So you have an opportunity to analyse it and to start adding language in a way that makes them, your consumer, basically think, well, I take their word for that. So such and such photographer says that this is what they do. I believe it. I'm going to start mirroring that language because they've given me that language to use. So now what you're actually doing is you're controlling the narrative. You're controlling what people are saying about you out there in the world. So if you're a florist that loves the kind of wildflower foliage, big look, say it, use that language, because you might come up against a competitor who also does that, but they're not putting that language into the world and you are, and so you're going to be the one that does, you're going to be that person that's known for that thing. Because again, you don't want to leave it to the market to interpret that. So overall, the goal when we are talking about differentiating ourselves is to say to your customer, here's why it needs to be me. Because that's what you want. You want your prospective customer to go, it has to be them, because whatever, because they're the best, because I love their personality so much, because they do this deal that no one else does, because they offer this service that no one else does. Whatever it is, you want to make your customer go, it has to be them. I've fallen in love with that service or product or person. Why? What that does ultimately is it shifts some of the power in the transactional relationship back to this side of the table, back to the supplier side. To get back to Nick Bruson's Blinding Lights, we want to be the best band we can be. We want to offer that premium service. That costs us money because, first of all, we need to hire the best musicians that we can get, and we need to rehearse regularly so that we can develop, complex 3-part backing vocal harmonies, mashups of tunes. All that stuff takes time, it costs money, so we have to charge a lot of money to do it. So by differentiating ourselves and by emphasising those differential qualities to the market, we're hopefully saying to enough couples per year, we're communicating that idea that it has to be them. I've found the perfect band for me. Because by doing that, we're able to persuade them that it's worthwhile spending that money with us, and we need to charge that money in order to do that service, but they will spend that money with us if there's a reason to do it. If we're the same as everyone else, if we're the same as every other wedding band, then we're bound by the rules of that market. So our pricing is really set by the conventions of the market. And so then maybe we're restricted in what we can do, and we're restricted in how good the show can be, or how good the musicians are that we're able to attract to join the band, etc., etc. If our price is defined by that of the market, we can't do everything we want to do. We're in business for ourselves. It's not a charitable organisation, it's a business. It's our preferences are important. So when the balance of power shifts to this side of the transaction, it allows us, not only we get to charge that money, which allows us to attract those musicians, which allows us to rehearse more, etc., which allows us, in my opinion, to offer a better product, but we enjoy offering that product as well. It also allows us to be a little bit more confident in what we can offer in the service. We get to define the terms of the service. The market doesn't define the terms of the service, because we're not like everyone else in the market. If we are the same as everyone else in the market, we have to not only do it for roughly the same price, but we have to kind of roughly offer the same service. So it has to be 60 to 2000s, a bit of everything, bit of Kaylee. We want to specialise in this thing, this funk soul stuff, and we want to do it at a premium so that we can offer the best service and so that we can enjoy the benefits and the rewards of being in a successful business. So we have to make the client go, we love them, it has to be them. When that power dynamic shifts, then you define the terms, not the market. To me, that's the exciting thing about being in business, is being able to define all of that stuff and being able to really get out of it what you want and define your service and your product in whichever terms you want to define it. So I guess we sort of touched so far on how you can sort of start to differentiate yourself, and also the reasons to consider doing that. Again, bearing in mind that that's a lengthy process that requires a lot of introspection and revisions and things like that. An easy way though that you can start to differentiate yourself right away is you should look as good as you can look. We're all in the wedding industry, we're in a visual industry. In almost all cases, it's about visuals. So much of it is about visuals. Flowers, about visuals. Photography, obviously about visuals. Venue is partially about visuals. Food is partially about visuals. So to me, your collateral that's out there, your brand that's out there, that is a reflection, inevitably that is a reflection on your aesthetic standards, because ultimately the stuff that's out there representing you, well, effectively you've said that I feel like that is good enough to represent me. I feel that website is good enough to represent me. So I approve of this website. So that website better look amazing, because your aesthetic standards are what are at issue anytime anyone considers booking you. Does this person have, because you haven't done those wedding flowers yet. So I'm not buying my actual wedding flowers. I'm buying your set of aesthetic standards. I'm buying your judgment. You can't show me my wedding photos before I buy them, or before I commission you to shoot my wedding. I can only look at what you've done before and extrapolate from that you have a set of aesthetic standards. So anything you put out into the world that is aesthetic in nature reflects upon those standards. So if you did your logo yourself and it's not very good, well, that's a shame, because you're putting something into the world that represents you and you're saying, I approve of this and I'm happy to go by this identity, and it reflects poorly on your aesthetic standards. Or if your logo is all right, so your photography is up here and then your logo is kind of here, well then your logo is diluting the quality of the perception of your aesthetic standards. So I think if you're serious about that kind of thing, I think it makes sense to not kind of fake that stuff. It makes sense to take that really seriously, because anything that reflects upon your aesthetic standards is, unfortunately, fair game for the customer. Obviously, that's a self-serving thing to say, because I am the co-founder of a creative agency. I have included a helpful link underneath this video that will give you some indication of how we can help you in that regard. Regardless of who you get to do that stuff, you should get someone to do it that does it professionally, if you take it seriously and if you are looking to grow in the long term, because it's not enough, especially when you're in a competitive industry, it's sometimes not enough to be awesome. Being awesome sometimes just gets you in consideration, and then often it comes down to how you can communicate those differential factors that potentially define your work to some extent. There's a fairly common perspective that, well, I can't afford to get that done, so I need to do the best I can and sort of let the work speak for itself. Can't afford it is, I think, slightly misstating it, because there's the cost of doing business. So you afforded your insurance because it's the cost of doing business. You shelled out for all the equipment you need, which in the case of certain industries is tens of thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds in some industries. You dealt with all that stuff because it's the cost of doing business. Well, actually, like, your collateral is the cost of doing business, marketing is the cost of doing business. So it's not that thing where you want to spend money on the business and then you slot in this marketing thing and you do what you can to get by. You can do that if you're serious about it, and if you want to really make significant progress with it and kind of kick it up a gear, then that's one of those things you just need to think about. Well, how do I budget for that? That's the other thing I think that can basically set you apart from your competitors, is take it seriously, spend accordingly. Not just on a creative agency. In other words, I'm not actually, at this point, I'm not saying give me your money. That was the last point. This point is also give your money to Facebook, and you could experiment with Google AdWords depending on what sector you're in. We're going to be covering all that kind of thing in a later video. But I think from the point of view of thinking about the mindset shift that we're talking about, that is one of those things that you want to consider along with the fundamentals of your brand, is the fundamentals of how you budget the business and how you end up starting to spend money on that stuff. If you'd like to make £30,000 in sales this year, £50,000 in sales this year, well, how much do you plan to spend on your marketing? If you plan to spend 500 quid drip fed through £3 Facebook boosts over the course of the year. Is that a realistic expectation? If you made 50 grand this year and you spent 500 quid on marketing, that would be a 100-fold return on your investment. That's obviously wild. Like, that would be a wild expectation to have. Some people can do it because you've been in business for 10 years, or because you have a really different looking product, or because you've just come flying out of the traps with this amazing service that everyone loves. Sure, great. Realistically though, most of us would probably expect to spend, you know, if you were spending 10% of your turnover on marketing, so in other words, if you were getting a 10-fold return on your marketing, you'd still be printing money. But all of a sudden, if you're looking to make 50 grand in a year, you're talking about spending 5 grand on marketing. And I'm not sure how many people watching this video want to spend 5 grand on marketing. I know that a lot of people watching this video want to make 50 grand in a year doing wedding stuff, or much more. So that's where there might be a kind of incongruous mode of thought when it comes to budgeting. So again, you want to stand out from your competitors. Well, just have the gumption to start spending that money. Make sure you have your house in order, and that everything that you're doing with it is as smart as it can be. And obviously that's what we hope to help you do, both in this video and in the subsequent videos in this course. But at the end of the day, just making that decision to put your hand in your pocket, that's going to help to give you a competitive advantage right away, because a lot of the people in the business aren't doing that. A lot of the people in the business aren't doing most of the stuff we've talked about in this. So if you can enact the stuff that we've kind of covered today, then hopefully that's going to, again, be one of the ways that you can start to stand apart. That's all I really want to cover for this first episode. I want to say thanks very much for joining us. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'd love to hear what you thought of the episode today. If you leave a little comment to let us know, give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and of course hit the subscribe button if that's of interest. I'll be doing more of these, of course 3 more in the series, and then in the future there'll be more marketing content, creative content, brand, social media, all that stuff. Loads coming up. So if you enjoyed, hit subscribe, let us know, and thanks very much.